think we'll hunt them down. Right? Put them to your friends. Friends, your friends. Probably. I think I'm getting sick. Joey, how are you? You're looking forward to Chico? It's time, huh? How old are you? How many college units do you have? College units. Hello, Tammy. How are you? Good. Oh, good for you. Yeah. Another funeral today?
No,
You just wear black?
yeah, generally, they got home is black. Work clothes.
You in black? There is a story. There are two very, very religious people, two men, very religious. And, one temperamentally is very happy, positive. The other is more reflective and sad. So one day they cross paths, and the happy one looks at the sad one and says, "Let us exchange our moods today. You know, I'll give you my happiness for a day and you give me your sadness." Sounds like a good deal, and they do so. And so the day passes. The guy who's usually sad goes to the house of the guy who's usually happy and bangs on his door violently and says, "I want my sadness back. I don't like to be happy. In happiness, you forget. Sure, there's an element of thankfulness, but in sadness, you sit and you think and you feel. So I'd rather be black than white, so to speak." So, right, Colin? Good job. You're still single?
Called me up last night.
Who?
The first guy.
The actor?
Yeah.
What is his name? Don't tell us.
You guys all know him, so it'd be weird.
We know him?
You know him, yeah. You all know him.
Who is he?
He's famous. You guys know him.
Just give us the first initial.
I.
iRobot? What's the second one?
A.
Ian.
Yeah. IAIN.
Ian.
Armitage. He's the guy who played Young Sheldon and Chase from Paw Patrol. But he's in a bunch of others too.
I have no idea who this guy is. Who's
Yes, you do.
Young Shelton?
Yes.
Young Sheldon?
Like the actor of
Yeah, dude.
What?
He's my age now.
Wait, what?
Yeah, he wants me back.
Wait, despite being around Angelina Jolie, he wants you back?
Yeah, he's around everyone. He met Dolly Parton.
He met Dolly Parton?
Yeah.
She's like dead.
No.
Well, she's almost dead.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
She is. She's like 95.
No, she's not. I love Dolly Parton. She's not dead.
Well, you know, tell him to tell Dolly Parton to contact Tammy
Okay.
for the end of life matters.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah. I'm sorry again for those who came late for Monday. So what do you guys want to talk about today? Hello. Yeah, Tammy. Oh wait, I'm sorry. Yeah, Tammy.
Oh, okay. I heard you mention this statement in one of your lectures, and I'm not sure what class, but three of your classes. Problem of induction.
Mhm.
Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Around the 17th century, there was this. Joey, why you? There was this guy. His name is David Hume. He was an atheist. He tried to find a teaching job. He couldn't. Nobody really liked him. As I mentioned, he didn't believe in God. He wrote this book about human understanding, Inquiry into Human Understanding. It's a really, really good book. And it's a book that you have to kind of read, and then you have to pass this examination if you want to get your master's or PhD in philosophy. Let me just change directions and do it in a way that you and I can, it's more appropriate for us. You're 50?
Almost.
You're 40 and I'm like 60. Been around for a while, you know. You go home, you cook dinner, and you put out your clothes for the next day, take a shower, go to bed. And as Al Pacino would say, you know, you put your dreams and hopes and fantasies under your pillow at night. So in the morning when you wake up, you can take them out and realize them. And you and I have been doing this for the past 50, 60 years. And the assumption is that tomorrow, the same thing will happen. That I'm going to at some point open my eyes and say, okay, it's time to move into life and do ABCD. That what took place yesterday will also take place today, will also take place tomorrow. I'll never get old, I'll never get sick, I'll never die. And so your ability to examine rigorously and reflect deeply about things just goes out the window, because it creates a certain habit inside you that just because I've been waking up every day for the past 60 years, it means I'll continue to wake up every day for the next 60 years as well. So I have time. I mean, it's interesting, but it's also not very interesting. You know, the problem I have with all these ideas, Tammy, is they just don't work. I went to a meeting on Thursday, and they were talking about, you know, streamlining the classrooms. Like, you know, giving instructors different classrooms. And here I'm sitting and thinking, you know, pre-COVID, classrooms are okay, no one was talking about it. You know, post-COVID, we are offering less face-to-face classes, so we have more classroom availables. And yet, for some strange reason, that's the thing they want to focus on. You know, I mean, I understand that at some level it's very important, you know, because some instructors have like 90 students and they want a bigger classroom. Anyways, you know, there is a scene. There's a book written by this man, very troubled, Hermann Hesse. Married 3 times, had like 50 kids. Well, maybe just 2 or 3 or 4. It's called Siddhartha. It's a really, really, really good book. My recommendation is, instead of reading the book, get Audible and listen to it on Audible. Okay? Colin? Tell Ryan. And Olivia. What's her name? Women, they remember everything. Like, you know, my wife and I. All of a sudden she says, you know, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I did what? It's like, they're like a junkyard. Sorry. So, there is a scene in the book where this young kid, Siddhartha, just so disgusted by everything. He's looking for something. He doesn't know what it is. You know, he thought marriage would give it to him. He thought having children would give it to him. He thought having great parents would give it to him. Getting a PhD would give it to him. You know, going out with the young Sheldon would give it to him. Going back to young Sheldon, who's now old Sheldon, would give it to him. But at some point, he just looks around and says, everything is a lie. You know, all of life is a lie. And at a certain point, you so desperately are looking for an ounce of honesty. And you don't know how to approach it. You don't know how to look for it. You don't know where to go to look for it. So, I mean, I think you have the right job if you haven't become numb to it just yet. You know, you're washing a corpse or you're putting a body into fire. Say, life is just fucked up. You know, you work really hard for the first like 50, 60, 70, 80 years and then that's it. And no one, you just slowly like fade as if you never existed. Makes no sense. You guys are so dark and gloomy. Joey. Yeah. Young Sheldon. All right, Danielle, go ahead.
So, after going over to the last assignment, it had me thinking about.
You sound so excited. it just inspires me. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's like
I think you and I may have been brothers like in the past life or or maybe, you know, you were my wife. Go ahead.
things that make up the center of a culture. So, I guess in terms of modern day application, what do you think is left of like the center of American culture? Why does it still exist?
Well, a culture is like a living organism, you know, and if you go back to Charles Darwin, you know, whether you have cancer or whether, you know, you have your young Sheldon and you have been going out with this like Sheldonette for a couple of years, you know, and you have built some memories and there's some attachments. I mean, these are all living organisms. For those people who have trauma on the inside and they go to like a therapist of sorts, you have to understand that everything that lives in us is like a living organism. And the nice thing, genius of Darwin is that, or maybe Darwin didn't say this, is that any living organism in whatever shape or form will do whatever to resist extinction or death. It'll fight to survive. So if, for example, you have been living with I hate my father for the past 20 years, I mean, it's a fully blossomed, like a gigantic tree inside you. And now you go to a therapist. What exactly is that you want to do? You want to destroy it, you know? And, you know, you have an entire culture, the trauma culture, that is going to fight back. Says, I'm not going to go away easily, you know? You got to demolish me, I'm not going to let you. And there are only two paths. You'll either win or you will lose. And most often you're going to lose. You know, because to create another seed, to keep nourishing it until it becomes as strong as a 20-year-old trauma, you know, so it can get into a wrestling match with it and hopefully pin it and get rid of it, it's just not possible. You know, so when you talk about the American culture, you have to understand there are very many layers to any culture. And some layers are toxic and poisonous, some layers are really, really fantastic and good. And so, you know, freedom is good, but being stupid is bad. You know, but you have freedom and you have individuality, but they have a cousin named stupidity. Hand in hand, it's just an awful mixture, you know. So there are certain aspects of the American culture that is just fantastic. You know, it was experimented some 2,000 years ago in Greece. To some extent, you know, it succeeded. In many ways, it didn't. You know, America is trying it again. But that's the problem that you encounter is, you know, I get this essay right? And whenever an essay is, at least the system flags it as plagiarized or AI generated, I just leave a note. You know, it's like 20% generated. Just be aware. And so the student emails me, you're accusing me of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, why they give me like a 60 out of 100. And this idea of self-entitlement, that the essay sucks, there's no depth to it, you know, they're not saying anything that's worth reading, right? And so you realize with privilege comes the sense of self-entitlement, that whatever comes out of me is good, you know. You can in fact use my shit to kind of, you know, I don't know, nourish flowers and plants in this, so I'll put it in the bag, leave it outside the door, you come and take it. I mean, that's how people are, you know. If you want to know if there is a center left in technologically advanced cultures, you should always go back Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who was in a Nazi camp for some time, you know, a Holocaust survivor. And one of the nice things that he said when he came out is that he came up with the idea of logotherapy. There is no meaning left. There is no center left. You know, you're no longer looking for bread. You're no longer looking for shelter. What you're looking for is meaning. What you're looking for is for some depth. It's kind of like, you know, you as a 50 or a 60-year-old man or a woman sit and you're just wanting to watch a movie that just, you know, nourishes your soul, and you keep flipping through these channels and all you get is just garbage, you know. I mean, the kind of music that's out these days, I mean, with the exception of Demon Hunters and The Greatest Showman or whatever, you know, you have some music out there that's really good, but for the most part, it's just trash. And if you examine very closely, the fact that 8-year-old girls have to now share bathrooms with like 9-year-old boys, the fact that you pull down your pants and you don't like what you see and you want to be the other gender, the fact that there is nothing wrong with any of this stuff. All I'm saying is that we're moving towards a direction that we don't really know what to do with any of these new things. You know, so you're on your own, man. It's something that my wife and I talk about all the time. If you really want to kind of give your life some depth and meaning, you got to join a cult. And by that, I mean, find someone who has some depth to them.
Yeah.
Whether it's a man or a woman, doesn't really matter. Have a group of friends, you know, where you guys like go hiking in the forest, you know, you make food together, you play volleyball together, you have like conversations about maybe race, maybe gender, maybe something, anything, you know, that moves you outside of this trash bin. And that can sustain you for a long, long time. Then find yourself a relatively nice companion. And that's going to be really, really tough these days. You know, because you have two sets of senses. You know, Tyrell, are you late because Ariana Grande was visiting you? So you have two sets of friends. I mean, not friends, senses. The first is, the task is to get you in touch with the physical world out there. You see a man, you see a woman, you say attractive, okay? And the problem with that is you create all these stories through just physical means. You hang out together and the other person grows on you. Then there comes a point where your psychological senses become active. You become interested in the way they think, in the way they put the dishes away, in the way they take the garbage out, the way they speak. You know, how often they shower, for example, who are their parents. And you realize these have nothing to do with your eyes and your nose and your touch, you know. And the problem is by the time your psychic senses come into activation and say, you know what, you need to move out, your physical body has created so many stories and so much attraction and attachment it's really tough to walk away. I think you should take the Socratic approach, knowing that the senses will always create lies. Don't shower. And don't wear good clothes. Be like Tyrell. Just kidding. There is this guy who is homeless. He walks around, College Avenue in Berkeley. I'm not sure who this guy is. I've always felt like he's doing an experiment on society. He's got the bluest of eyes, like Toni Morrison's book, The Bluest. And he's very calm. And he demands respect. Like you can't just go to him and say, here's a piece of bread, or here's $10. He says no. And so you're forced to say, can I buy you a hamburger? And again, he'll say no. But one of the nice things about this particular young fellow is maybe in his late 30s. He doesn't smell very good. And his outfit is not very attractive, but there is a sort of presence to him. And that presence forces you to overlook what your eyes see and what your nose smells, and you actually want to sit next to him and say, well, like, what's going on? Tell me a story. Hello. So, anyways, I don't even remember your question. Yeah, tell me.
So regarding the living organism,
Yeah.
would you recommend starving it? Like, how do you get rid of something that's living? And for example, you mentioned the hatred for a father. How do you get rid of that living organism?
You can't. Look, if it's a sofa you don't like, you call a couple of friends, you bring a truck, you put it in the truck and you trash it. It's very easy. Things that live inside our psychic world, nearly impossible. So let's talk about for a moment about, say, hating parents, right? So in the Jewish tradition, the 10 Commandments, the 5th commandment is honor thy parents. Now, you and I and we here, we're all parents. So now we move into parenthood being a virgin in the sense that we've never experienced it before. We've seen other people do it. We've seen them screaming at their kids and we say, wow, well, I would never do that. We've seen them spanking their kids. We say, I'm never going to do that. So at a certain point, you realize, well, you're 18 or 19 or 20, you go to a gathering or a party and there's a guy who's like a Trump, doesn't just come and grope you just yet. He just comes and says hello, like a decent, mature human being, some self-respect. Raised relatively well by parents, says, how you doing? What's going on? You're cute. My name is like Joe Schmo. And you guys build a story, and then he is respectful enough to say, to not touch you at all. Says, how about you and I have, a cup of coffee later on, like next week or so? You say, fine. At a certain point, like 2-3 months into this game, you become attracted to him, and he becomes attracted to you. And you don't have to work at this. It just happens organically, And that's the first thing you need to understand. People get together not because they know anything about one another. It's not because they know their culture. There is no respect, that's taking place. You just don't know the person. All you know is that you're attracted, okay? And then you guys have sex. And of course, you begin to have fantasies. Yeah, I'm going to marry him or I'm going to marry her and all that stuff. And depending, if you've had sex before that, how often you've had it, are you approaching it casually or a bit more serious? Are you using, protected sex, all that. And young people are somewhat careless. And so you have sex, and there is no pulling out, and time passes, and you realize, man, it's like that time of the month, but it's not happening. And you say, well, I've been late before, and you wait a week or 2, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 10 weeks, not there. And then you say, maybe I should go to Safeway and, give myself a test. And you do so, and it comes out positive. And you call this guy, you guys are relatively good, and you say, hey, by the way, ABCD. And at first he throws a temper tantrum. Oh, you should have done ABCD. What's wrong with you? I trusted you. And so you're a Catholic, he's a Catholic. You don't believe in abortion. He doesn't believe in it. You're scared, he's scared. He's not done with school, you're not done with school. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is kids just happen. No one plans kids. And if you happen to be very, very reflective, and you look around you, whether it's 2,000 years ago or today, you say, you know what? I'm not going to put another human being down here. Life down here sucks. And, it's a fantasy that all parents to be have. I'm going to have children, be a family, this, be a father, be a mother.
Here's a question. No kids involved. You're attracted to someone, and all of a sudden you decide you want to cut the relationship off. Would you start the relationship? Is it safe to continue to talk to a person, or remain friends? Or do you just start it, completely cut off all contact?
So, since you interrupted my very slow and
so
boring
sorry.
story, and I don't really blame you. Tyrell, why are you smiling? Are you watching a movie? Don't be distracted, just focus on your work. So, let me change directions. Forgive me for being so slow and monotone and boring. The truth is, I'm just angry.
I'm angry about.
Don't I look angry?
No.
Oh. Maybe that's why my wife has been taking advantage of me. I don't express my anger properly. So, no one enjoys being depressed. I'm not talking about a depression that gives birth to creativity, like young Sheldon missing Sheldonette, and one of the ways that he tries to get rid of his sadness or depression, loneliness, he writes her a poem, Oh lark, I am so mad I bark. I'm so stupid for having let you go. Come back to me so we can go to Jumbo Juice and get Mango Go-Go. You guys like that? You didn't know I could rap, did you? So thank you, Lark, thank you. I appreciate that.
Beautiful. That's exactly how it went.
So since depression is not fun, it's not a fun world to be in, people take antidepressants and it doesn't work. People seek therapy and it doesn't work. And the truth is they do all these things because they want to get over the depression. They want to see the sun. They want to go out and have a good time. They want to go out on a date and not think about their father or their mother. They want to think about marriage and have a positive outlook on their marriage. They want to have children without thinking, am I going to put my kids through what I went through? And I think in many ways, anyone who's ever been depressed has tried, somehow starving. And one of the ways we starve, dark moods is by, I suppose, distracting ourselves. It's like you just have a breakup, you love the guy or the gal, and you just can't sleep, but you want to just shut your mind so you can get, 2-3 hours of good sleep so you could be rested a little bit. The rest just doesn't come to you. And in as much as you try to silence it, it screams back, okay? And so this idea of, silencing something by force, it just doesn't work, okay? One of the I suppose if you could starve it for a long, long, long period of time, maybe. Consider the following. You have like a 17-year-old kid, young adult, and they have a very profound religious experience, be it in a dream or an out-of-body experience, and they go to their parents and say, kind of like Martin Luther King around the 15th century. He's at school, he wants to be a lawyer, that's at least what his father wants him to do. On his way back, the weather is bad, kind of like the storm we're going to get in a few days. And for the people of 15th, 16th century, seeing storms and thunderstorms and lightning bolts is a huge deal. It's like an act of God. So he kind of kneels and says to Saint Anne, if my life is spared, I shall become a monk. Now, you're a young man, you have all these hormones running wild inside you, and you say, I want to be a monk. I'm never going to have sex. I'm never going to look at the opposite sex and kind of have fantasies about them. At a certain point, he comes to realize that, sex has so much power over him. And he gets married. As a monk, he gets married. So in as much as he tried to silence this part of himself that says, be celibate, don't have sex, don't have like porn fantasies, it just doesn't work. Going back to honoring thy parents, you can interpret this in a variety of different ways. Parents to be always have these wonderful stories about themselves. I'm going to take care of my child for the rest of my life. It hasn't yet hit the physical world, but that's the story you tell yourself, and you believe in it. The three of us. How many times did we go to IKEA and steal things for, our kids that are going to come out after like a few weeks? We decorated the rooms, we bought the best beds and the mattress, all these ridiculous toys, and we played all these games with them, right? And then life enters, and we're frustrated. So what you have is the fantasies, and then there's the reality. These are two very, very different things. To be a living, quacking, hands-on parent, you just need a different set of skill sets. And these are very difficult to come by because we don't have a good GPS. We don't really know what that looks like. Yeah. In a world that's moving really fast and changing really fast. In my time, your time, cartoons, you would never see two characters kiss. Now, you're two and you're seeing like two characters make out right there in the quad, Laney College. And you sit back and you say, what the hell? And it's the Garden of Eden story. You expose the kids to like kissing at the age of 2, and they won't experiment it by the time like they're 2 years and 2 days old, And after a while you say, well, what should I do? Should I just like move to an Amish country? Should I move to the forest? What else should I do? There is also this other part, which is there are two parts to you. The masculine, which is the father, and the feminine, which is the mother, okay? So there are two forces about you. From 9 to 5, you give your life to Caesar. From 6 to 10, you give your life to the feminine or the creative part, to God. And so I think when it comes to parenthood, if you happen to be intellectually very, very profoundly mature, this is the way I think, if you want to overcome these things, this is the way you should approach it, that I doubt very much when I was in my mother's belly, she fantasized about spanking me, screaming at me, becoming a drug addict, becoming an alcoholic, none of those things. Like any parent to be, they said, I'm going to be the best parent the world has ever seen. And they say this because they haven't been tested by life. The endless screaming, diapers being expensive, rent, food, a marriage that's going nowhere, a companion that pays you no attention. And, it's like they have a snowball effect. After a while, you realize that even looking at your infant that you adore makes you so angry for you had him or her at the wrong time with the wrong person, And so I think if you happen to be a kid and you have this negative history with your parents, the only way I think you can starve anything worth starving is by understanding it really, really well. Let's say you love someone and they leave you. She was wise, She hung out with the young Sheldon for a few days, and then he got intoxicated with power. He said, well, I can go out with all these other women, for example. For men,
That's not how it went.
it doesn't matter.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
And so, the Sheldonette here says, what does it mean to be a human being? You're going to remain forever confused. You're going to assume that your happiness is going to be found by going out on dates, by making money, by making another movie. At the end of the day, the truth is all of us go back home, all by ourselves. We walk alone home. And even though you may be laying next to your companion whom you love, there are going to be moments where you're going to say, man, I just feel so isolated, so lonely. And so having understood this, Lark says, you know what? You can go to hell, you can go wherever you want to go, it doesn't really matter. The truth is, you're not exempt from the human condition. No matter how much money you got, how many people you meet, how many people you have sex with, none of those things really matter. Right. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What Danielle said about the Center of American Culture and kind of about the whatever. If there's a problem, mainly in in American culture and politics, government, whatever, and if we want to, what's the best way to change a problem that we see that aren't directive, that aren't, how do we fix the problem?
It's so nice to be young and to have not been by experience. I mean, you're very, very, very lucky. I mean, most of you in this class. It reminds me of a young man who didn't have any money, no education, but he was in love with this girl. And so goes to the father and says, I want to marry your daughter. So, do you have money? I am rich. Well, do you have money? I am very, very, very rich. Well, do you have money? No, but I'm rich. Well, are you educated? No, but I'm so rich. And going back and forth after an hour, the father looks at this young man and says, so you keep saying you're rich. What are you rich with? I have dreams. And that's something that you lose as you get older. When you're young, you're rich with having fantasies about, I'm going to find the right guy or the right gal. I'm going to have a great marriage or a great life. As you get older and you realize the complexities of life because they've touched you, and you now walk around wounded, limping along, you kind of begin to lose some of those hopes and dreams. And after a while, I don't know if you like action movies, but Rambo, I think it was Rambo 4, not the last one that takes place like Mexico, but Rambo 4, this is like a soldier. This is like a man who has dedicated his life to his country, to the well-being of his nation, people, his peers on the battlefield. And at a certain point, he walks away from the whole thing, And the interesting part of Rambo 4 is that, he lives a very, very secluded life. You know, you join the military because you want to make changes, both in your own country as well as outside of it. You really do want to go to Iraq and create democracy. You know, you want to do all these wonderful things for people you don't even know. And little by little, you get touched by politicians. You know, imagine like, you know, you want to marry someone and you love him. And all of a sudden, you realize that marriage really has two parts to it. One part has the love factor, the other part has the legal factor. And young Sheldon looks at you and says, you know, I love you, and I'm going to marry you and stay with you for the rest of my life. But this is the prenup. And all of a sudden you realize the legality, the politics, and the love are now coming together and they don't mesh well. Okay. And so there are these very hopeful group of Christians who approach Rambo and they say to him, we've been told that you can get us across this river. And Rambo says, no, that's a war zone. You can't get to this place. We'll give you whatever money you want. He says, well, do you guys have guns? He says, no, we don't have guns. We're like Christians. We have Bibles. And he looks at them and says, just fuck off, you know. Because he's come to realize that compassion, generosity, that just because you give, you know, $10 to a homeless person, it doesn't mean that they're going to look at you and say thank you, even if you do it like 10,000 times, because thank you is not part of their culture, you know, for whatever the reasons. Rambo has come to realize the only way to make any changes is kind of like what V said in the movie V for Vendetta. You can apologize, but at the end of the day, I'm going to kill you for what you did to me 20 years ago. That some angers and some forms of violence are justified because, like very much like what the French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau had argued. I mean, some of us in this class have been in relationships. At what point do you scream at your companion? I mean, your volume is at level 1, then it goes to 2, then it goes to 3, then it goes to 4. Then it's just blast. Why? Because you've tried being rational, you tried being reasonable, you tried being forgiving and generous and compassionate. You've always looked the other way. At a certain point, your capacity just gives, you know. And so what happens in that movie is that, and I'm not giving anything away for those of you who haven't seen the movie, is that near the end, I mean, these Christians are captured, held hostage, they're going to be executed. And all of a sudden, Rambo enters the scene, you know, and the alpha male of the Christian community grabs this stone, you know, and bangs it on this guy's head, the guy who was going to kill him. And you sit back and you say, well, this is a guy, beginning of the movie, he's all about compassion. He's all about forgiveness. He's all about Bible. He's all about every life is sacred. And near the end of the movie, you realize, well, this is a man who's tasted what real life really looks like. You know, and you need to give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Caesar is about cunningness, you know. So I think you can help a few people. If you've watched that show on TV, South Park, is it? You know, and I think season 8 or season 5, episode 8, or, you know, or Martin Luther King comes back to life and he's about to give a talk. And, but he's told that you have to wait for Snoop Dogg and Beyonce and all these people to do what they do first, and just sit back. We'll call you when it's your time. Now, this is a guy, you know, who made such a huge movement, right? He's like a Jesus Christ of the 20th century. But he needs to be put on pause because there are other heroes that play here, like Snoop Dogg. And so he waits and waits and waits and waits, and now it's his turn. He says, well, now if you want to lecture to people, go ahead. He comes on the stage, people are dancing, some are high, some are drunk, they're just loud and obnoxious. And he looks at the crowd and he says, you know what, fuck this. He goes out and says, gets a taxi cab and he says, Canada, please. And the point I'm trying to make, I suppose, is can you inspire people? Absolutely. Is inspiration short-lived, or does it have a long shelf life? It's very, very short-lived. If you're an emotional junkie and you like the idea of people praising you, you like the idea that you're inspiring people, that's fine. But for inspiration to become something of a substance, have depth, it needs to be protected. How do you protect anything? I mean, look at what your mom is doing. She drops you off. She picks you up. She looks at your emails. She reads your texts. When you go out on dates, she follows you without you knowing. That's how she protects you, because she cares for you. You inspire her. A good amount of who she is, what she is really about you. You make most of what she is. And so she's not just going to give up that so easily. And so if you, and remember, these days it's really, really tough to inspire people, because you have to fight with the YouTubes, the fact that people's brains have been rewired to just looking at shorts. They have no patience. They're self-entitled. They don't even listen. They're bored all the time. And so you're very lucky just to get people excited and interested in anything. Once you have them, once they're baited, the question is, what do you want to do? If you're young, you say, well, why don't you come to my office? I'll make you a cup of coffee or tea. We can sit, we can talk. And then you use their five senses. They slowly begin to like the decoration of your office. They begin to enjoy the tone of your voice. They begin to enjoy the calmness, the dim lights, all those things. And you want that to become habitual for them. So when you go there at 4 a.m, there they are waiting, So what are you doing here? I had no place to go. And then, there's a good amount of you now lives inside them. You say, why don't you go do philosophy or humanities? And once you do, if you go to a big school, that big school will open many doors for you. If you go to a smaller school like San Francisco or East Bay, you'll have, a more of a difficult time. If I'm still alive, come look for me, knock on my door. I'll find you a class or two to teach, if there is budget and all those things. And you realize it's a lot of work. So when you talk about change, you're talking about, first of all, people who have been bought. You're talking about politicians who are in the habit or addicted to certain forms of thinking and behaving. It's really not difficult to kind of look at the shutdown and say, people don't have food to eat. I've been hungry in the past. Myself, I've slept on bus benches. I worked at Church's Fried Chicken. I worked graveyard at Shell gas station in Del Paso Heights in Sacramento for a number of years. And when you forget those things, then you just become an ass. You become a politician. And then add to the fact that you have the Supreme Court, which is not really supreme at all, that halts, pauses the funding, for SNAP. It just makes no sense. So when Danielle asks, what is it about the American culture? Is there a center? I just don't know where you go to find that center, to find the meaning that brings people together. Not even hunger has the power to bring people together. Politicians, Trump is a bully, and most of the people who work for him are bullies. In any other country, it'd be like a revolution. Here, no. You have a very saturated middle class, and the middle class, they all want to be like Elon Musk. They no longer look below them. There is this photo or painting. Anyways, I'm tired. Anyways, anyone else? After me? Joey, yes. So, before we talk about that, there are a couple of things. Have you ever sat in my brother's classes? Because he doesn't teach here. He teaches at American River College.
I'm gonna catch him when I'm there.
You gonna go there?
I'm transferring in January for the Oratory Science program.
Where? At-
American River, it's there. It's the only place that locally.
Really?
Here.
It's such a nice place. They just built some structures brand new. It's a nice campus. And Los Rios is a well-funded district. Yeah. My brother is very rational. When he teaches psychology or political science, his lectures are very structured. He has a definite plan. And every 2 seconds he tells you about, Stanford, this is research, and then Yale did that research. He's a nice looking man, so, he's a little distracting. You don't know if you should listen to his lecture or you should just look at him. I mean, when I see him, I just look at him. But I've always been envious of him because he remembers things so well. And he's so organized. And his lectures in many ways they flow well and they're so smooth and articulate. Especially as a kid, his grades were always A's. My grades were always F's. So I had to go to some wasteland and somehow creatively change the F to an A so I wouldn't get spanked by my parents, right? And this is something that, old school people understand and have experienced. Hitting was very common. In India, Mr. Turner, one of my teachers, I just dozed off for a second. And the next thing I know was this eraser hit me in the face. How dare you sleep in my class? How old was I? 11. Who does that? India. Now, he didn't have the need to feel things. He just read an idea, he liked the idea, he memorized it, and he gave it back. Okay. I couldn't do that. And so I mention this because I think every philosopher, every thinker, every person is hardwired with a certain temperament. And there isn't much you can do about that. If, for example, you like this class and you like the way I teach, but your temperament is very rational, very organized, you may say, well, I want to teach philosophy and I want to teach it like that. The truth is you can't, because that's not who you are. You're not wired like that. And you live with that fantasy for a long, long time until you get your PhD. Then you'll walk in the classroom and you want to be animated, but you may not be able to, because that's not who you are. So it takes a while for you to understand that David Hume is very different than Soren Kierkegaard. Moses is very different than Jesus, And to some extent, you could say that every human being is a victim to their temperament. So, next is the time in which you're born. Okay. The truth is, by the time you get to the existential movement around the as a movement, not as a temperament. Because if you look at existentialism as a temperament, Jesus was an existentialist. Why? Because Judaism was not able to give him meaning. His community was not able to give him meaning. There was no center for him, inwardly speaking. He was an existentialist. He lived in angst. He was depressed. He was looking for something. Okay? The Buddha did not belong to a movement, even though these people did create a movement. Inwardly, they were existentialists. Okay? Then you have someone like Soren Kierkegaard, someone like Jean-Paul Sartre, someone like Heidegger, someone like Simone de Beauvoir, someone like Albert Camus. Now, these people may temperamentally be very much like a Jesus Christ, but look at the 19th century. 19th century is the rise of the Terminators, factories, big cities where people live as strangers. Religion no longer has power. Family no longer has power. Tradition no longer has power. Everything you used to believe in has been taken from you. And you sit back and you say, okay, how should I live my life? For many thousands of years, you and I, you wanted to know who you are, you read the Bible. You should know how you want to know when you should get married or why you want to get married. Reasons are very, very simple. Your parents will tell them to you. Should you pursue this pleasure that's taking place inside you, this tornado, have sex with this guy? The answer is no. Shame, guilt, remorse, repentance, huge deals. Okay? The time you get to the 19th century, everything is gone. Now you have a movement. You don't have a Jesus Christ, but you have 50 of them. Why? Because as human beings, we are meaning-seeking animals. I mean, look, you sit in this class for a couple of reasons. You sit here because you like it. You sit here because it serves a purpose for your academic career. It's meaning. If every time you came to class and you got bored, there's a good chance you're just going to drop the class. So all of us are desperate for some sense of meaning and stability. Existentialism basically is, how do I live my life? I look at my parents, I don't like who they are and how they live. I look at religion, it's just ink on paper. I look at, Kim Kardashian, I don't find beauty there. I go to my philosophy classes, there is no love and there's definitely no wisdom there. This is information, I can Google it. And then you sit back and you say, I have this, it's like this ghost within. It's just screaming into my ear day in and day out. Can someone please help me? And so you're desperately looking for a meaning. I go to meet my dean for the first time, and it's really just about like human connection. All of a sudden it's, do you guys offer degrees? What's your class size? What's this size? What's that size? And it just devolves into some meaningless chatter. Important, but just chatter. Now, that doesn't really do much for you. I guess the point I was trying to make, not that I was, but if I was, what was that movie? Do you guys remember it? With Charlie Sheen and Michael Douglas. Anyways, he comes on, after having served some time in prison, Michael Douglas comes on the stage and he says, you guys live in the worst generation. You got no parents, you got no savings, there's no culture, if the question has to do with you and young people in this classroom, it's really difficult for you guys to come to believe in anything that's worth believing in. There is nothing in the culture that inspires belief. Everything is kind of in the hands of the wind, a leaf when you look at it. One day it's going this way, one day it's going that way. And in the end, it just withers away. Unless you get very lucky. It's like you have all these issues inside you, and by chance you meet a companion or meet a person, and you guys begin a romantic relationship, but they understand where you are, who you are, what you are, and they have an extreme capacity for garbage. And they take your garbage day in and day out until you trust them, and until slowly you're just baptized by their patience and forgiveness. And then you guys live a happy life for the next 50 years. Now that is luck. And you can write a book, but the truth is, what you don't really understand is you were just lucky. If you happen to be a seeker after meaning, some of it has to do with your own effort, but most of it really has to do with luck. Find the right person, that person will inspire you, and before you know it, you're on a path. So, that's what depressed people are looking for. People who are chronically depressed, they're really just hoping to be inspired by a book by some medication, by some therapy session, by some paragraph, by some fucking thing out there, so they could overcome it and live their life. Tyrell? By the way, for those of you, I don't know what time it is, but for those of you who are free, you have a class next period, you're more than welcome to stay. Yes, Colin? Anything? Anything?
Yeah. Speaking of desperately searching for meaning, what are your thoughts on astrology?
I think it's a great science. It's not enough. In other words, me having money to support our life, it's not enough. Me having good looks and money to support a good, healthy life, it's not enough. Even me having a great temperament, it's not enough. Because once we have kids, the truth is you need grandparents around. You need relatives around. You know, astrology used to be a very, very wonderful science before the hippies took it over and made it into fluff, you know. It happened to be a very, very sacred art. So was numerology, you know. All these sciences, they have a function and they were made for a reason. And the reason is that, you know, you kind of land on this planet in some shape or form. At a certain point, something about you says, what are you doing here? Where are you going? What does it all mean? And so, you know, you go and ask your mom, when was I born? You know, what day? What time? You know, then you look at the month, you look at the day, you look at the year, and you put them in the right zodiac houses or house. You figure out when the sun entered, when the sun leaves, you know, how everything is going to like open and close. Then you do numerology, you know, first name, last name, master numbers. And it's all really for one reason. You're just curious as well as you want to figure things out. You know, how should I live the next like 5, 10, 20 years of my life? You know, I don't want to be a leaf in the hands of the wind. I want to make it meaningful. The other aspect has to do with our tremendous fear of death. I mean, I can't tell you how frightening it is once you begin to think about it, really. You know, it's kind of like all of us in this class. You know, you go out with a young Sheldon for like 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, and then he just breaks up with you, or you guys just, whatever. You know, and then you sit back and you say, really? After like 5 years, am I that easily forgettable? You know, how could this be that this guy or this gal just moves on? Did our relationship mean nothing? And the truth is, that's what death looks like. You mean nothing. And everyone is forgettable because everybody is small, irrelevant, and insignificant. You know, and the truth is, deep down, all of us desire to live a big life. I mean, there is a reason why you read the autobiography of Malcolm X. There is a reason why you go to a city hall. You know, you want to leave a mark. You want to be remembered. I mean, in as much as I think that Trump is a buffoon, but the truth is, I mean, this is a guy who's now desiring a stadium to be named after him. Why? Because you want to be remembered long after you're gone. You know, I know Hitler was evil, but the truth is we talk about him all the time. He embodies the dark nature that lives inside all of us. I mean, that's immortality right there. And our fear of death goes back to, you know, our ancestors, the Neolithic period, where you're buried, but, you know, you're buried with tattoos. You're buried with certain instruments. So you could ward off the, you know, evils that are going to come after you in afterlife. You know, you contemplate, not think, contemplate, where, Dastan, hello. You got my email?
No.
Okay. Contemplate, you just sit somewhere. You know, it's like you put a turkey in the stove and temperature is 250, and it just sits there. Just sits there for the next like 10 hours. You know, and then inside it's cooked. Then you remove the aluminum wrap and you put it on broil so that the top can be kind of like this beautiful brown color. And now you have beautiful inside, beautiful outside. That's contemplation. You sit somewhere and you just reflect, and you feel and you think and you get confused and it's frustration and you're filled with dread and anxiety and, you want to scream, you want to be angry because there are no answers, and you realize there's a reason why we enjoy distraction, because contemplation, it's really, really tough. It's a horrifying, gruesome place to be. So, you guys are so quiet. It feels like a funeral. Anyone else with anything? Hassan?
Why is it a suffering place?
Was it what?
Why contemplation is a suffering? Why can't one contemplate without suffering?
When you're happy, do you think deeply about anything?
Yes.
No, it never happens.
Well, it depends what you mean by deep.
Dastan, can we play fair? When you're young, you don't want to lose, and I understand that. It's part of just being young. When you're young, you have one of these important elements, the 7 deadly sins called pride. You're right about everything. You know what you're doing. You know where you're going. You know who you are, what you are. And so you get yourself in a conversation and your companion, your mom, your dad, some stranger is deflating you a little bit. You begin to question, you begin to be uncertain. And then you play the semantic games. Well, what do you mean by deep? What do you mean by who are you?
Not in that sense.
No, it's exactly in that sense. No, which is okay. And I only say that because I did that for 60 years. It's only been the past few years when I realized that I think if you want to have a conversation, it's good to be honest. It's only now. So I'm not blaming you or pointing fingers, none of those things. The thing is, happiness is a place of forgetfulness. We have a poem in Persian that when you and I were hungry and we were homeless, one blanket covered both of us. Now you have a blanket and I have a blanket, but neither cover us fully. So I covered yours and you covered mine. In other words, I have a blanket, but I want yours too. And what you realize is in poverty, we unite. In privilege, we divide. In pain, you have no choice but to think. And it's not just a reaction to thinking. You reflect, and it's painful. Because you reflect because you don't have the answers. And you know why you don't have the answers? Cars have 2 bumpers, a front and a back. When you get hit from the back, the bumper protects you, depending on how hard you get hit. All of us in this class have a bumper. Whenever something hits us, whether it's an idea or an event, the bumper is there to protect you. You experience pain when the bumpers no longer do anything for you. Assalamu alaikum. I know you guys have a life. Is it time to go? Joey, what time is it? Oh, we have, my mistake. So, Dustin, any more questions? We'll save it for the next class.
Yeah, just follow-up question.
This is Dastan.
Is this a different class or something?
I think so.
Oh, philosophy. Or,
You know, she's like majoring in philosophy.
oh yeah?
No, what? I'm 16.
But that means you're not majoring in philosophy? That means you have no interest in like thinking?
Yes, sir.
What is wrong with people these days? Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe.
Did you know that she used to go out with young Sheldon? Do you know who young Sheldon is?
Yeah.
He's like a genius. You know, he corrects your taxes. Take it easy. I'm sorry, go ahead. You should be proud. Yeah, you're like purgatory. I look at you, I think about young Sheldon.
I hate that so much. I shouldn't have said it.
I'm just kidding. She doesn't know Sheldon. Go ahead. Dustin.
Yes. I'll give you 5 more seconds. Perhaps there are more jokes coming. Okay, so maybe one thinks not he suffers not because he thinks, but he thinks because he suffers.
That is,
Way out.
yeah. A few days ago, we had to bury my sister-in-law. So I have a kid who happens to be 8. He comes to me and he says, I can't sleep. Why? I don't want to die. So you're absolutely right. And I think there is something about you temperamentally that forces reflection. At a certain point, you're going to look at a homeless man and you're going to ask why. You know, that's going to cause some pain. باز بانگی از نیستان میرسد غم به داد غم پرستان میرسد. Some people worship sorrow, sadness, suffering, pain because they enjoy the reflection caused by it. You know. So some events cause reflection, and you could be a happy-go-lucky sort of a guy, but that also causes reflection, temperamentally speaking. I think human beings are just condemned to be reflective from time to time. Now, you have people who accidentally fall into reflection, and people like those who major in philosophy, the right kind of philosophy, want to be professional reflectors. Now, if you want to major in philosophy in the right way, right kind of philosophy, there is something about you, Dastan, that loves pain. A pain that gives birth to ideas, to inspiration. But the undercurrent, sorrow, sadness, pain, trouble, violence, anger. But use them in a way that Mike Tyson was never able to when he was younger. I mean, look at young Sheldon. Have you seen the movie, the show on TV? This guy can never have fun. He's like a 5-year-old, but thinks like a 40-year-old. Søren Kierkegaard. He said, the moment I was born with a twin, old age. Yeah.
You can only be like smart and philosophical if you're really depressed.
No, but where are you going? Time for what? Leave for where? Where is home? Good to see you. So, look, a couple of things. It depends on your definition of philosophy. Okay? If by philosophy you mean love of wisdom, and if by wisdom you mean something that can't be found, and you keep knocking on a door, but it's the wrong door, and the door is open, but it's not really what you're looking for, then you realize that this philosophy means that you're separated from an unknown thing. And whenever you're separated from something you desperately desire, it creates yearning, it creates longing, it creates passion, and you don't want it. Because you keep knocking and you want this door to open and you want whatever lives inside that door to be given to you and you want that thing to be enjoyable for you. But it's the wrong thing. You raise your hand and you say, what is philosophy? And I say, well, Immanuel Kant said A, B, C, D. I don't give a shit about Immanuel. I don't give a shit about David Hume. I want to know what philosophy is. I say, well, let me tell you about the 7 different faces of love. I don't care about those things. And the thing I'm trying to say is, it really depends on the intention of your question. If by philosophy you mean grabbing books, reading them, and vomiting the information out, well, you could be very happy. You know, you could come to class and, you know, have a very wonderful way about you, and you can talk about these ideas, but these ideas don't really touch you. You know, it's like when you have a cavity and it hits the nerve. You know, whenever you experience love, it's hitting the nerve. Whenever you're looking for wisdom, it means information is no longer what you're looking for. Being learned is not what you're looking for. Being knowledgeable, you know everything about Karl Marx. You want to be Karl Marx. How the hell do you get there? That's what you're looking for. You know? And so all of a sudden you realize, well, it seems like philosophy is a really difficult thing to teach anyone. You know, we don't really know how to define it, how to describe it, how to explain it. And all we can do is just refer to symbols. And the problem with symbols is that they're not really the thing itself. But yeah.
Is the role of the philosopher to like try desperately to see what's behind the door, even if it's the wrong door or whatever? Like try to find like the truth, or is it the actual act of like knocking on the doors?
So you have Dionysus, which is the god of intoxication, of drunkenness. You have Venus, you have Aphrodite. You know, I don't know where to go to find the goddess Eros. It's a face of love, but it is intense, and it is passionate, and it is destructive, and it is creative. But I don't know which of the 7 realms of heaven I need to go to find that goddamn goddess. But you know, there is a trick. By chance, I go to Pete's Coffee. And by chance, I run into a young woman. And by chance, I'm attracted to her. And after a few weeks, I realize I can't stop thinking about her. And you realize something really interesting. I can't get to Venus. But by hanging out with Jackie, I can get a glimpse of what Venus looks like and feels like. You can't get to philosophy, as Plato can't get to philosophy, but what he can get to is a medium. If he's able to find a Socrates by interacting, you know, with Socrates, it's like if you want to drink some tea, well, there's a price you got to pay. Your hand stretches out, you lift the cup, you put it to your lip. The cup is Socrates. You got to see it. You got to touch it. And through Socrates, you get a small glimpse of the wisdom that lives inside him. Now, no one has complete wisdom because all of us have a specific capacity. We can only take so much. You know, Jesus could only hold the spiritual aspect. Moses could hold the spiritual, but also brought it down and made it physical. Okay? Muhammad did the same thing. Confucius did the same thing. That I have the capacity not only to be a container for wisdom, and the spirit, but also to pick up my sword and fight injustice. You know, Jesus couldn't do that. It was too much for him. The only thing he would do once in a while is scream and shout, you know, you shall not see me here again. You know, you've made this a den of thieves, all that stuff. You know, it's really tough to kind of hold the spirit, have compassion, generosity, forgiveness, at the same time know that there is a time where you need to chop someone's head off. And then go back and say, you know what? The spirit is okay with that. God is okay with that. Generosity is okay with that. It's a tough place to be. And so what you have in Socrates, for example, is you have a guy who wants to teach you philosophy, but he knows the only way he can do it, inflicting pain. Why do you need pain to teach anyone anything? Because it's the only way you're able to learn. Pain. You know, I mean, you're in a relationship. While you were in it, sure, once in a while you get hiccups. Should I stay? Should I go? Then he leaves you. Or you leave him, whatever the case may be. Now he says, take me back. Well, you still have some time to think. Why do you think? Pain. You know, do I miss him? I'm only 18 or 19 or 20. Do I really want to commit to a serious relationship? You know, I want to like stretch out my wings and fly here and fly there. And all of a sudden, taking me back does not seem very interesting. Pain gives you clarity.
Last class you talked about like foundations, building your foundations and so what's the limit to how like strong your foundation can be?
You don't know. You know, it's kind of like dating. You know, when the guy moves a little too early, you say, hey, back off. You know, but when it's the right time, yeah, you can hold my hand. You know, maybe our shoulders can touch. Maybe we can kiss. You know, this other part, you got to wait for like the next 25 years when I'm like 38. Okay. And you realize that at every stage, you begin to realize your own capacity, what you can give, what you can take. And I think foundation is very much the same. There's this beautiful story about capacity in the Quran. Quran is the Bible of the Muslim world, okay? It's about Moses. And Moses imagines like he has this infinite capacity for wisdom. And God keeps telling him, Moses, you have reached your max. Stop it. You know, just go and live your life, man. You know, do what prophets need to do. Stop harassing me. And Moses keeps saying, no, God, I don't think you know me as much as I know myself. I have great capacity. God tests him. And then Moses comes to understand that, you know, he has limitations. And I think one of the nice things about this story is that all of us in this class, imagine we have an infinite amount of capacity. We have capacity for greatness, for intellectual prowess, all those things. But the truth is, maybe you can only understand a couple of lines in Plato's dialogue. That's your capacity. And the more you force yourself, the more frustrated you're going to be, and the more incompetent you're going to feel. Now, the subtle part is the following. The only way you will understand your own limitations is by being tested. You can't sit in your office and write books and go out and say, oh, well, I think I can be a good philosopher. That doesn't work that way. You know, you got to do what Socrates is. You have to be a person of the people because people are going to rub you the wrong way. And you got to see how much you can bend, where you have to break, you know, where you have to fight back. And I think Bruce Lee was right. Boards don't hit back. It's only in the fight that you understand your own capacity. And it's something that Moses couldn't understand until he was tested and until he failed all three tests. Yeah, so doing this armchair, it's no good. You know, coming to class and assuming, you know, when you walk away that you've learned a few things, you haven't learned anything. Yeah. Well, I don't want to keep you guys longer than you have to stay, so. It's good to see all of you. You are more than welcome to stay if you wish, but you can also go. Where are you going, Danielle?